Across centuries, through civilizations rising and falling, one stubborn pattern endures. The people entrusted with power are rarely the ones most suited to wield it wisely. We marvel at human ingenuity, at rockets that reach distant planets, at cures that conquer disease, at societies that advance in leaps of science and art, yet time and again we watch as societies elevate the unfit, the impulsive, the reckless, into positions of immense authority. Aristotle observed this paradox long before modern politics existed, warning that human nature is prone to selecting leaders not by merit, but by charm, fear, or superficial appeal. Consider the emperor who led his empire into ruin because of hubris, surrounded by sycophants who masked incompetence with flattery. Imagine the modern politician whose charisma masks a lack of foresight, whose ego eclipses reason, yet who commands millions, shaping policies with far-reaching consequences. Even in the corporate world, brilliant ideas are often undermined by CEOs whose arrogance and poor judgment drain innovation and wealth alike. And yet, the tragedy is not only in the mistakes of those at the top. It is in our complicity, our willingness to follow spectacle over substance, personality over prudence, emotion over rationality. This is not a flaw of the few. It is the vulnerability of the many. We are captivated by the drama of leadership, seduced by the illusion of competence, and blinded by the very traits that make power dangerous in inexperienced hands. Why do societies so often choose those least equipped to govern them? Why does history repeat this cycle relentlessly, despite centuries of evidence and learning? This is the question Aristotle dared to confront, a question that remains as urgent today as it was 2,000 years ago. And the answer is as unsettling as it is revealing. Aristotle, observing the world over 2,000 years ago, saw the patterns that continue to define human governance today. In his seminal work Politics, he argued that leadership is not merely a matter of popularity or wealth, but of virtue, rationality, and wisdom. True governance, he believed, demands a character capable of seeing beyond personal ambition, capable of balancing justice with prudence, courage with temperance, and yet time and again, societies fail to elevate such individuals. The tension Aristotle identified is profound. Democracy, in theory, is a triumph of human reason, the collective wisdom of the people guiding the fate of the state. In practice, however, the masses often prioritize charisma over competence, familiarity over judgment, spectacle over substance. A leader's ability to inspire applause can eclipse their capacity to govern wisely. The majority, Aristotle warned, may be well-intentioned, but they are vulnerable to emotional appeal, manipulation, and the seductive power of confidence divorced from skill. History offers countless examples. Ancient Athens, the cradle of democracy, repeatedly entrusted its city to demagogues, whose persuasive rhetoric masked poor judgment. Leaders rose on the strength of emotional appeal, only to steer the polis into disastrous wars or political upheaval. Across centuries, the pattern recurs. A brilliant orator captivates the crowd. A popular figure wins loyalty, yet the outcomes of their rule reveal a chasm between perception and reality. Even today, the echo of Aristotle's insight is unmistakable. Political campaigns prioritize spectacle and media mastery over careful reasoning. Public opinion sways more with emotion than with evidence. The traits that should define governance, forethought, moral clarity, intellectual rigor, often secondary to charm, image, or tribal appeal. Virtue and wisdom remain rare commodities in the corridors of power. While the trappings of authority magnify every flaw, Aristotle's warning is both timeless and uncomfortably accurate. Societies are predisposed to choose leaders who appeal to the heart rather than the mind. Competence and virtue are not guaranteed by election, acclaim, or popularity. They must be recognized, cultivated, and defended. And until societies learn to value these qualities over superficial allure, history will continue to repeat itself, elevating those least equipped to navigate the immense responsibilities of power. The rise of incompetent leaders is not merely a political or historical anomaly. It is a psychological inevitability rooted deep in the human mind. Across centuries, certain personality traits repeatedly appear among those who ascend to power, as if incompetence carries its own magnetism. Narcissism, for instance, blinds individuals to their limitations while amplifying their sense of destiny. Overconfidence, the kind that convinces a person their judgment is infallible, can turn even minor miscalculations into catastrophes. Impulsivity ensures that decisions are made in the heat of emotion rather than the cool of reason. Together, these traits create a leader who believes they are above scrutiny, immune to error, and incapable of recognizing the consequences of their actions. Yet, the psychology of the leader alone does not explain the phenomenon. Society itself plays an active role in elevating incompetence. Cognitive biases deeply embedded in human cognition act as the Dunning-Kruger effect ensures that those least competent often overestimate their own abilities, while the masses may underestimate the complexity of the decisions at hand. Herd mentality drives people to follow the crowd, even when logic dictates otherwise. Obedience to authority, a trait famously demonstrated in psychological experiments, conditions ordinary individuals to defer judgment and accept directives unquestioningly. Propaganda and manipulation further tip the scales. Emotional appeal, repetition of slogans, and the strategic use of fear or hope can transform superficial confidence into perceived competence. The populace, eager for simplicity in a complex world, gravitates towards certainty rather than insight, image rather than integrity. In this interplay, incompetence becomes performative. The more a leader exhibits flawed decisiveness or bluster, the more they are celebrated as decisive, daring, or bold. Consider the pattern in both history and the modern world. Leaders oblivious. 2 economic warning signs, social unrest or scientific counsel, yet cheered for charisma, rhetoric, or audacity. The psychology of both leader and follower creates a dangerous symmetry, where flaws are amplified, mistakes magnified, and wisdom suppressed. Competence is no longer the currency of leadership. Perception is. The result is a relentless cycle. Those least equipped to govern gain positions of extreme influence, and those who follow often remain unaware of the mechanisms that allowed it. Philosophy explains the ideal, but psychology reveals the machinery. Understanding these forces does not simply illuminate the past. It exposes the vulnerabilities of the present. To grasp why society repeatedly elevates the incompetent, 1. Must confront both the inner workings of the human mind and the societal structures that exploit them. In the theater of power, ignorance is amplified. Confidence is mistaken for skill, and the line between competence and folly blurs until catastrophe becomes inevitable. History is a mirror, reflecting the same mistakes over and over, despite the passage of centuries and the accumulation of knowledge. The rise of incompetent leaders is not a modern anomaly, but a recurring pattern etched into the story of human civilization. Consider the Roman Empire, once the pinnacle of organization, strategy, and culture. Emperors like Nero and Caligula, enthroned by politics, intrigue, and public spectacle, turned governance into chaos. Nero's obsession with personal indulgence led to catastrophic fires and the neglect of state affairs. Caligula's impulsive decisions and cruelty destabilized Rome, leaving citizens and institutions alike in turmoil. Their personal flaws became systemic disasters, proving that the incompetence of a single individual could ripple outward, engulfing entire societies. The medieval period offered no refuge from the same pattern. Kings and nobles, chosen by inheritance rather than merit, often displayed the same arrogance and short-sightedness. Decisions made from pride, ignorance, or superstition could plunge entire regions into famine, war, or economic collapse. Power, concentrated in untrained hands, became a dangerous experiment, repeated across kingdoms. The very structure of authority, when divorced from virtue and wisdom, assured that human folly would be amplified. Revolutions promised change, yet frequently replaced one flawed leader with another. During the French Revolution, charismatic revolutionaries who promised liberty and equality often ruled with unchecked zeal. Their ideals, noble in rhetoric, collided with human weakness impulsivity, ego, and fear. The results were bloodshed, betrayal, and new hierarchies that mirrored the ones they sought to destroy. Similarly, in the 20th century, dictators rose not solely from ambition, but because societies overwhelmed by uncertainty, fear, or nationalism surrendered reason for the comfort of a confident, decisive figure. Hitler, Stalin, Mussolini, each exploited the psychological vulnerabilities of their nations, translating charisma into catastrophic authority. Even in the modern world, the lessons remain disturbingly consistent. Corporate mismanagement by CEOs, political blunders by elected officials, and catastrophic policy decisions continue to demonstrate that education, connectivity, and information alone do not immunize societies from folly. The collapse of financial institutions, disastrous wars, and regulatory failures are often the result of leaders whose overconfidence, arrogance, or lack of insight magnified minor mistakes into public crises. Technology, global communication, and mass media have accelerated the impact, allowing errors to resonate faster and further than ever before. Across time, the pattern is undeniable. Societies elevate leaders who appear decisive, confident, or charismatic, even when those traits mask incompetence. The consequences are both dramatic and predictable: human suffering, societal instability, and missed opportunity for progress. History does not merely record these failures, it reveals an underlying truth about power, human nature, and the fragile mechanisms of governance. Competence remains rare, vigilance remains necessary, and the allure of spectacle continues to outweigh the value of reason. The past teaches, with brutal clarity, that the risks of entrusting authority to the unfit are not abstract. They are immediate, tangible, and enduring. In today's world, the ascent of incompetent leaders is accelerated by forces Aristotle could scarcely have imagined: mass media, social networks, and the digital attention economy. The modern landscape transforms leadership into performance, where perception often outweighs substance, and spectacle can be more powerful than strategy. Charisma, clever soundbites, and viral moments can make an individual appear competent regardless of actual skill or wisdom. The leader who excels at performing decisiveness on a screen may hide profound incompetence behind confidence and style. Turning popularity into authority, social media amplifies every flaw and every triumph, creating a stage where leaders are judged more for visibility than virtue. Algorithms favor engagement over accuracy, sensationalism over nuance, and outrage over reasoned discourse. A tweet, a viral video, or a dramatic public statement can define a career more than policy, experience, or ethical consistency. Ordinary citizens, drawn to emotion, repetition, and simplicity, contribute to this ecosystem, often mistaking confidence for capability. Confirmation bias ensures that we seek messages that reinforce what we already believe. While echo chambers shield leaders from critique and accountability, corporate leadership is similarly affected. CEOs whose decisions make headlines, whether for boldness or controversy, are often celebrated while critical failures go unnoticed until it is too late. Public perception, amplified by media narratives, becomes the measure of competence, and image supplants insight. Ordinary people, enthralled by spectacle and reassured by apparent decisiveness, inadvertently reinforce these dynamics, perpetuating the rise of leaders whose judgment is superficial, impulsive, or dangerous. Politics and media together form a feedback loop, where attention translates into influence, and influence is rewarded with further visibility. The traits that were once minor liabilities, impulsivity, narcissism, become advantages in a world where optics often matter more than outcomes. Aristotle's timeless insight resonates here. The mechanisms of society, whether ancient or modern, remain vulnerable to the allure of the confident over the capable. The subtle danger lies in our complicity. We are participants in this system, willingly or not, amplifying charisma, spectacle, and performance. While technology has multiplied the speed and scale of influence, the psychological patterns remain the same. The rise of leaders who appeal to emotion rather than reason is not an accident, is a reflection of human susceptibility, magnified by the tools of the modern age. What history shows is that when society prioritizes perception over virtue, visibility over wisdom, and spectacle over substance, the consequences are as dramatic, destabilizing, and destructive as ever. The rise of incompetent leaders is not solely the result of personal flaws or psychological bias. It is also a reflection of the systems and societies that elevate them. Across history and into the modern era, certain structural and cultural factors create fertile ground for incompetence to thrive. Education gaps leave populations ill-equipped to critically evaluate leaders, prioritizing image and rhetoric over evidence and insight. Tribalism, whether political, cultural, or ideological, channels loyalty toward identity rather than merit, encouraging the elevation of those who appeal to group affiliation rather than competence. Superficial metrics of leadership further distort judgment. Popularity, wealth, or visibility are often mistaken for wisdom or capability. Leaders who excel at self-promotion, who master the optics of decision-making, can appear competent even when their choices are reckless. Ordinary citizens, despite rational faculties, are often complicit, drawn by charisma, reassured by confidence, or lulled into conformity by fear of dissent. In many cases, the public enables incompetence unwittingly, reinforcing patterns of behavior through applause, attention, and obedience. Fear of change adds another layer. Societies tend to cling to familiar figures, even when evidence suggests they are unfit to govern. Stability, or at least the illusion of it, can feel safer than the uncertainty of reform or challenge. This paradox, the tension between collective intelligence and collective folly, reveals a subtle but persistent truth. Communities capable of reason often act irrationally when emotions, habits, and systemic pressures dominate decision-making. History provides vivid examples. Ancient Athens, despite its celebrated intellect and democratic institutions, repeatedly trusted demagogues who exploited popular sentiment, leading to disastrous wars and political turmoil. In modern societies, voters and shareholders alike can reward spectacle over substance, creating cycles where incompetence is amplified, consequences are delayed, and accountability is diffused. Philosophically, this raises uncomfortable questions about our role as participants in the machinery of power. Are we merely observers of folly? Or are we enablers, complicit in the elevation of those least equipped to lead? The answer lies in reflection and awareness. In recognizing our biases, questioning tribal loyalties, and valuing virtue over appearance, individuals and societies can begin to break the cycle. Yet, until such introspection becomes widespread, the elevation of incompetent leaders remains an almost inevitable outcome of human systems. Ultimately, the story is not solely about flawed leaders, it is also about the vulnerabilities of the people they lead. The machinery of power is sustained by human choices, emotional impulses, and systemic weaknesses. Understanding these forces is essential not only to interpreting history, but to confronting the subtle, persistent ways in which societies continue to place authority in unworthy hands. Aristotle never claimed that human folly could be eradicated. What he did propose, however, was a framework for mitigating its consequences, a path toward society more capable of recognizing and nurturing true leadership. At the heart of his insight lies education. It's not merely in the accumulation of knowledge, but in the cultivation of judgment, moral discernment, and the capacity for reflection. A populace trained to think critically, to question appearances, and to value substance over spectacle is less likely to elevate the incompetent. Civic virtue is equally crucial. Aristotle believed that the health of a society depends not only on its leaders, but on the character of its citizens. Responsibility, integrity, and an awareness of collective consequences must permeate daily life. When individuals practice these virtues, they form the bedrock of resilience against the seductive illusions of charisma and authority unearned. Leadership then becomes not a product of spectacle, but a reflection of societal values. Meritocratic principles are another essential component. while history and modern experience demonstrate that competence alone does not guarantee elevation. Aligning authority with demonstrated capability reduces the risk of catastrophe. Systems that reward expertise, ethical foresight, and rational judgment rather than mere popularity or performative confidence are a buffer against the persistent rise of incompetence. Yet even in societies structured to promote wisdom, the threat of poor leadership remains. Human nature, with its vulnerabilities to bias, emotion, and manipulation, ensures that idiots in power will never disappear entirely. The goal, then, is not perfection, but mitigation, fostering awareness, cultivating virtue, and encouraging personal and collective responsibility. Every act of reflection, every moment of discernment, becomes a subtle but powerful resistance against the forces that elevate folly. Ultimately, Aristotle's lessons extend beyond politics into the personal sphere. By observing ourselves, examining our own biases, striving for clarity and judgment, we contribute to a culture that prizes reason over performance. The cultivation of wisdom, both individually and collectively, is the closest society can come to safeguarding itself against the persistent, predictable patterns of incompetence and power. In this endeavor, philosophy is not abstract, it is a tool, a guide, and a warning, inviting each of us to participate in the shaping of a wiser, more conscious world. The story of human leadership is, at its core, a story of paradox. Time and again, societies produce leaders who are unfit, impulsive, or blind to consequence, yet humans continue to follow, repeat, and reinforce the cycle. Aristotle observed this over 2 millennia ago. The lesson remains urgent. The mechanisms that elevate incompetence are woven into the fabric of human nature, not merely the accidents of circumstance. And yet, within this inevitability lies a profound responsibility. The rise of idiots in power is not only a reflection of individual flaws, it is also a reflection of collective choice. Every act of uncritical acceptance, every indulgence of emotion over reason, every unexamined allegiance contributes to the perpetuation of incompetence. The machinery of power is sustained not by leaders alone, but by the compliance, complicity, and cognitive vulnerabilities of those they govern. Awareness, reflection, and cultivation of virtue do not guarantee perfect leadership, but they shape the culture that surrounds it. Societies that value reason, scrutiny, moral integrity create a buffer against the predictable failures of human weakness. Even small acts of critical thought, when multiplied across communities, become a quiet resistance to the elevation of folly. The eternal struggle is neither political nor abstract. It is personal and collective. Human systems may never fully eliminate incompetence, yet understanding the patterns, acknowledging our own complicity, and striving for wisdom offers the closest approximation of defense. History, psychology, and philosophy converge to reveal the unsettling truth. Power will always tempt folly, but consciousness, vigilance, and virtue can temper its consequences. In this ongoing tension lies both the danger and the hope of humanity, the recognition that while leaders may fail, thoughtful society need not.